Hi there, thanks for visiting my Research Day talk. My name is Dr. Jonathan Schaefer. I'm a postdoc at the Institute of Child Development, and I'd like to share with you results from a project I recently undertook examining associations between adolescent cannabis use and psychoticism. So why cannabis? Well, epidemiological studies have repeatedly shown that individuals who use cannabis are more likely to develop psychotic disorders than individuals who do not. This has led many people to conclude that cannabis and psychotic illnesses are causally related. That is, that smoking cannabis when you're young can bring about a chronic psychotic illness in people who would otherwise not become ill, particularly if they have a genetic predisposition to that type of problem. However, it's also possible that associations between cannabis and psychosis arise for other reasons, for example, because they share the same environmental risk factors or because of genetic overlap. So we investigated this possibility by using data from two longitudinal studies of same-sex twins. And the reason we use twins is because twins share a lot of things in common. They're the same age, same sex, have the same parents, and share most or all genetic material. This means that if cannabis and psychosis are causally related, you would expect twins who use more cannabis to score higher on measures of psychoticism than their co-twins who use less cannabis. If you fail to observe this twin difference, on the other hand, that suggests the association between cannabis and psychosis is more likely due to shared family environment or genetic factors. So you can see a rough outline of the two twin cohort studies here. Twins were assessed for cannabis use and use disorder at ages 11, 14, and 17, and then for psychotic symptoms and traits at age 24 in one cohort, and then age 34 in the other. Looking at the descriptive tables, you can see that cannabis use and misuse were relatively common in our cohorts. About 1/3 of participants recorded using at least some cannabis in adolescence, and 13% of the combined sample met criteria for a cannabis use disorder. You can also see that at age 17, our average cannabis users, were reporting somewhere between 1 and 3 uses of cannabis per month, and somewhere between 5 and 100 uses in their lifetime. But we also had participants reporting greater than daily use and more than 400 lifetime uses. So there was a pretty substantial range overall. Moving over to results, the first question we wanted to answer was, is greater cannabis exposure in adolescence associated with greater psychoticism in adulthood? And the answer to that question was yes. We found that both measures of adolescent cannabis exposure were associated with higher scores on our measure of psychoticism, as well as its various subscales. The second question we asked was, does this association persist when you look within twin pairs? So you compare the more cannabis-using twins to their less cannabis-using co-twins. And if we saw a difference here, that would be consistent with a causal effect. And so in the twin models we ran, this is captured by the within pair effect. You can see over on the right-hand side of the table here. And you'll notice these are consistently non-significant. And so that's inconsistent with there being a causal effect of cannabis. Finally, even though we found no evidence of a causal effect of cannabis on psychoticism in general, we wanted to see if we could find any support for this idea that cannabis might have a more dramatic effect among the subset of people at higher genetic risk of psychosis. So we used the genetic data we had on our twins to create a polygenic risk score indexing genetic propensity to schizophrenia, and we took a look at whether this score interacted with cannabis exposure to predict elevated risk of a psychoticism. And so as you can tell by the p-values in model 3 here testing the interaction effects, we did not observe this. There was no significant interaction. So we found no evidence that cannabis was more strongly associated with psychoticism or more weakly among people at high genetic risk. So all that said, what are the takeaways? Well, a few things. So first, it's important to note our initial results were consistent with these epidemiological studies. We found that adolescents who used a lot of cannabis did tend to score higher on our measure of psychoticism as adults. But, and this is the key exception, the key but, we found no evidence of twin differences in psychoticism when we compared more cannabis-using and less cannabis-using twins. We also observed no evidence suggesting that cannabis use was associated with particularly large increases in psychoticisms among genetically vulnerable adolescents. So altogether, this suggests that cannabis and psychoticism are related to one another because they share common risk factors, not because cannabis causes psychosis. Accordingly, people who are interested in reducing the development of psychotic disorders may not get a lot of traction by focusing on adolescent cannabis use and may therefore want to focus their efforts elsewhere. And so that concludes my little mini presentation here. If you have any questions or feedback, I can be reached at the email shown here, and thank you for watching.